Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of the Big 12 Mafia podcast. With me today are Wild Ute, a
Hey,
good visitor that we share a show on the Holy Rivals, and he's decided to join us today. We appreciate you being here, Ute.
sure. Thanks for having me.
And the master of disaster, as I like to call him, Greg Swaim.
I
Greg,
like that. No, I like that. That sounds good. And hopefully, disaster for maybe the Pac-12 and the ACC will turn into good things for the Big 12.
boy, isn't that what we all want? I
Yes, we
think that's
do.
what we all want. That's right.
I'm already catching crap about wearing KU stuff, so I'll
Yeah.
let the folks know too. I love all the Big 12, but some of you might know Bill and I went to college together at OSU. So when Bill gives me something to wear, I usually wear it. And today it's like 70 degrees after a big storm yesterday. So yeah, I wear something a little warmer.
All right. Well, let's just jump right in. I've got a graphic here I wanted to pop up, and we're going to lead off with the ACC.
Absolutely.
And Greg, just go ahead. I'm going to let you just sort of tell us what's going on.
Well, you guys know, because you follow it as well as anybody. I've watched a lot of podcasts today just to see if anybody has something I missed. There's a lot of people who have to explain to their listeners and viewers what grant of rights is and all that stuff. We're not gonna insult our listeners and viewers by doing that, because you guys all know that the ACC has a grant of rights. It goes through 2036, so another 13 a dozen years, whatever. And if they stick to that with the money they're getting, which is about Big 12 money, but if like a Clemson or a Miami or a North Carolina or somebody like that, Florida State, were to stay in the conference and accept that 32 million a year, they would lose approximately, I can't remember what the number was, but it was $1 billion from what the Big 12 is now paying out compared to what they would get over those 13 years.
Okay.
That's not chump change, folks, and you cannot survive. That's why I don't know how the bigger schools of the Pac-12 are going to survive off 20, 25 million or whatever. But today the ACC got serious, and Brett Murphy and some of those guys had the story on it. 7 schools now, which is 7's a big number, because we were talking a couple of weeks ago about 2.
Right.
The originals, Florida State and Clemson, they kind of carry that conference on their back as far as football money, which football money, hey, that pays the bills. So that's what they do. And they said, hey, we cannot survive off this contract through 2036. We've got to have more. Now, whether that's going to be through revenue sharing, and by the way, if you're hoping for revenue sharing and you're an ACC fan, don't. It didn't work real well in the Big 12 when Texas and Oklahoma wanted it.
Unequal revenue sharing, Greg? Are you talking
What's
about
that?
unequal revenue sharing?
Yeah. I think, what would I say? Unequal revenue sharing is something that I just don't think works. For one, you're not going to get infinitely more money than the other folks, and for two, it's not going to appease them. It might short term, temporarily. It didn't help Oklahoma and Texas very long. They booked out of there as soon as they could. I don't know what UCLA and UCLA were getting, USC and UCLA were getting with the Pac-12. I don't know if they're getting more. I know Oregon and Washington are talking about getting more in their conference in Pac-12. But in reality, it's not that much difference, and it's not going to make a difference compared to what the Big Ten is paying. So today you had the 2 North Carolina schools, North Carolina State, jump in there. You also had the 2 Virginia schools, Virginia Tech, to join the 2, and really 3, because Miami was always kind of in there. They were kind of the one that stuck their toe in the water, while the other 2 just dived headfirst in there. And they've been after this for a while. And it's just now coming out, although, we've talked about it before, guys, with you and Bomber. We've talked about this.
Right.
The ACC, the 2 schools we mentioned before, Clemson and Florida State, were always wanting out. They're not making near enough money. They're carrying that conference, kicking and screaming on their back, and they want more money. So guess what? They would like to test maybe the SEC or the Big Ten. Now, I don't know how many of those schools are AAU accredited, and we all know the Big Ten likes to have AAU accredited schools. So that's going to be a factor in where these schools go. But let's say those 7 schools go somewhere else with Notre Dame. 3 of them join Notre Dame in the Big Ten. 4 of them go to the SEC. Now, who's left? Right. And I think the Big 12 looks at those real seriously. So today was a huge, huge deal. They've got 2 more days of these meetings, and we'll be watching it real closely.
Yeah. So, Greg, what does this mean for the Big 12? I mean, this in these 7 schools, what are the Magnificent 7, right? That's what everyone's dubbed.
That's what Brett McMurphy coined them today.
And Ross Dellinger, I know, reported.
Yeah, Ross. Yeah.
So this is some tectonic movements right here with these ACC schools trying to break out of this grant of rights. And the big rumor of the day, the reporting is how do they break this? And apparently 8 schools out of the 14 ACC schools are required to break out of the conference, break out of the GOR. That's the grant of rights. So we'll see if they can separate from the GOR here.
Well, and the 8th school may well be Notre Dame.
I was going to ask, do they get a vote?
They get a vote, but they're a partial member. That's why when they say 7 is half, you have to have more than 1/2. Okay. So you've got to get one of those other 7 schools to jump. Well, why would Syracuse jump? Because they know if there's no ACC, they may not be in a conference, at least not a power conference. Same for Boston College. Trying to think, Duke, because they're, certainly this is about, they're a basketball school, and when you're a basketball school in this, it's kind of like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Right. They're obviously the top program in college basketball. You could argue that may not be helping them. Would it help them in the Big 12? Perhaps, because the Big 12's looking at basketball-only schools, and you could take Duke, and their football is good enough. I mean, we've had Kansas for however long as I'm wearing a Kansas shirt, but Kansas has been terrible for 10 years. They've not been as bad as Duke. So, I'd take Duke to get their basketball and just kind of hold my nose and watch their football team.
Okay.
What are some preferred schools from a Big 12 standpoint? Really, what are the targets then? I mean, outside of like the big fish, UNC, Clemson, Florida, they're going to jump to the SEC.
You're not going to get those schools. And I'm a Big 12 guy, but I'm realistic. I'd love to have Virginia Tech. Right. Now, everybody's going to say, well, Virginia Tech and Virginia are tied at the hip. North Carolina State are tied at the hip. No, they're not. Texas A&M, everybody said, oh, they're tied at the hip with Texas. They can't leave. State legislature won't let them. Well, there they went. And now Texas is going to join them anyway. Same thing for Oklahoma State. Everybody said last year, no, Oklahoma won't leave Oklahoma State behind. Well, they did. Look, it's man for themselves. Yeah, it's conferences too, but the bottom line is man for themselves for your school.
So I want to ask everybody to hit subscribe and give us a thumbs up so that we know we're doing a good job. Our comments right now are live, so if we get any good comments, we'll definitely follow those up in the show. And then please subscribe so that you get notifications when we do these shows again. All right, Greg. So this is part 1, and I would say I started with this because they're Eastern time zone, so they started early this morning. This afternoon really kicked off for the Pac-12. So how's that been going?
Well, the news is not quite as free-flowing out of there. The news I got today from the Pac-12 is from 2 basketball coaches. As you know, because I've been on your show before and explained it, what we're doing now is secondary, maybe third in what I do for a living. Number 1 is sports recruiting, mostly basketball. So some football guys too. So when I need something out of a conference, usually those are my go-to guys, because even in this, we talked about it being about football, but the basketball guys are being kept in great communication with their ADs, presidents. And some of them are hearing some things, and usually they text me pretty quick when they hear something they think I need to know. Today, from the Pac-12, there is talk about, San Diego State, obviously they want to add, and they've been talking about that a long time. I think San Diego State, SMU, perhaps two more, maybe. I don't know if UNLV, Fresno State, Colorado State, those have been mentioned. The Pac-12 is different because they're kind of like the Big Ten in that they require certain academic standards, and I get that. Man, I've got a master's degree. My dad had a PhD, so I'm an engineer, so I'm pro college, I'm pro academics, but I'm also pro athletics, and I think sometimes people, I had this in college, a lot of professors that didn't like, they just did not like it. They thought it was worthless, and they didn't understand, like my dad did in the engineering department, that, hey, those 7 Saturdays, that is the biggest 7 Saturdays you will ever have during the year to get donors for academics as well as athletics. And I asked him one time, what are your biggest days? The 7 biggest days every single year are home football games, at least at Oklahoma State, and I assume in a lot of places.
Greg, what are the academic standards that you're hearing from the PAC schools? Like what are we talking here for academic standards?
They like, you mentioned the R1, the research type stuff, the AAU, and I like I said, I got 2 degrees from Oklahoma State, which is not as high as like Utah, for instance. Utah's 105, I think, in U.S. News and World Report, which is okay, but I mean, you got teams in that conference, schools in that conference, like Stanford and Cal, that are among the top 10 in the country. I mean, after me. So I don't know why the 4 schools, and it's been mostly Utah, and you're a Utah guy, so you understand that. If everybody was like you, we wouldn't have a problem, but
maybe.
Well, I mean, we're not always going to agree on stuff, but this, if the Pac-12 falls apart, and that's what I've always said, if it does, if they get close to what the Big 12 gets, let's say they get 25, so they're fairly close. It's not worth it to leave. Stay there for 5 years, do a 5-year grant of rights, whatever. Stay there, and maybe things will get better. Maybe things will get worse. Who knows? Because I have a feeling that the money that the Big Ten and the SEC just got are not going to be the same next time around for anybody. I just don't think the money's going to be there in the future for college sports. I don't.
Yeah, I think we're hitting a bit of a recession just in the overall economy. There's no way that media is going to be exempt from that. And we've seen layoffs all across the board on, I think, every broadcaster. So I guess the question would be, is it enough to tip over that cart, right? Is it enough to really break it? And you've been breaking this stuff down for months and months and months. And I wanted to ask you a question, and I need you to really tell the audience why you're a differentiator. I've heard a lot of Big Ten, specifically Big Ten, and a few Pac-10, Pac-12 people really critical of your reporting and your sourcing. And I've known you for a while now, and everything I've ever seen you do has, if it's not been, like predictions of the future, it's certainly some good educated guesses, right? So tell everybody why you are what you are.
Ooh, that's going to take a lot more than your show time.
We can do it again a different day. We can do it in 2 parts.
Why I do what I do? Because I got into radio in 1988, and we're always looking for stories that affect, in my neck of the woods, certainly the Big 12, the Oklahoma State Cowboys, here in my own town and all that stuff. And conference realignment started really kicking in back, about 15 years ago, pretty much when, the Big 12 kind of started blowing up with Colorado to the Pac-12, Missouri to the SEC, Nebraska to the Big 10, and Texas A&M to the SEC. And so, did I get that right? It's been a long time. I've slept since then. And then Texas and Oklahoma leave and all that, and you bring in 4 Power 5 or G5, excuse me. And people are like, "Oh, Swaim, what are you talking about? The Pac-12 is going to take, Big 12 teams," and you get guys like Klykov saying, We haven't decided if we're going shopping there or not. And I know that was a smart ass comment, but kind of stupid. And I mean, really, the Pac-12, the biggest problem they have is George Klaikoff.
Right.
I mean, would you agree with that? I don't know how you could get a guy who is less. I'm not going to say professional, because I think he's professional, and he's got to be smarter. He wouldn't have gotten to where he's gotten. But I just think he's in over his head. And a lot of it happened before he got there. I'll give him that. But man, I mean, everything he does just doesn't make sense. And he's keeping these guys on a string. And I really hope, and I know I've been mean to some Utah fans because they've been mean to me. And hey, somebody kicks me in the teeth, I kick them right back. But they don't. I don't think they get it. Like, it's almost like we were G5 for so long, and now we're P5, and we just went to the Rose Bowl 2 years in a row. Mm-hmm. And you know, we've got the academics certainly to get in the Big Ten, but I mean, you guys know this. The Big Ten is not really looking right now. And they're not looking at Utah. If anybody, they're looking at the 4 Pacific Rim schools, the 2 Washington, Oregon, and the 2 Cal schools, California and Stanford. Yeah. And they're looking for academics, and they're also looking for travel partners for UCLA and USC. And they would own the entire West Coast if they do that. Okay. And I think that's what they're going to eventually do. But then where does that leave, you know, the 4 corner schools? Where does that leave Wazoo? Where does that leave the Beavers?
It screws us. It totally screws us.
It does. And that's why it's almost like I'm a little mad at Utah fans, almost like, you know, my own child, like, okay, you're making a mistake and I'm going to let you do this. And I don't mean to be condescending, but I've seen this movie before, and I don't want Utah fans, because it's a great program. It's one of the few programs of Pac-12 that I think has an unbelievable, crazy fan base. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I don't want to disrupt the BYU Utah thing, all that, but the arrogance of some, not you, not others, but the arrogance of some is just off the charts. Like, dude, I'm trying to explain to you, you're going to be stuck in a G5. You're going back to the Mountain West. You know, I can see this happening. And it's going to happen. And now with the ACC, hey, if tomorrow, if 8 schools break away and the Big 12 gets 4 of them, I don't know if they'll take a Pac-12 school. And then what happens? Well, you stay together, but you stay together at like $22,000 or $22 million, whatever it is. And over a 5-year period, that's really going to break you with NIL. I know they're not supposed to be tied in together, but they really are. So that's a bad, not to mention, if you get a bad TV package, it's not linear. People don't see you. Recruits don't see you. Mom and dads don't let their kids go to California, to Utah, to wherever, because, you know, we live on the other side of the Mississippi River and we want to see our kids play. There's a lot of problems.
Greg, Greg. So Utah fans, we have a lot of pride.
Absolutely, and I love that.
We've had our what we've got, though, right? I mean, like, we've got back-to-back Rose Bowl appearances. We won the Pac-12 twice. 4 of the last 5 years, we've been in the conference championship game. We came from G5 status, 12 years ago. We've had to earn every.
You beat Alabama with Urban Meyer. I remember that very well.
Yeah, we were the first BCS buster, and it feels like we just get disrespected a lot. So Utah naturally, like, they kind of have their hands up. They're trying to protect themselves and fight back and stuff, because we're trying to fight for pride and respect, and we feel like we're getting disrespected back. And with the Big 12 kind of coming at Utah fans, it's a tough dynamic, because we're proud. We do.
Well, we went through this last year. Just last year we went through this, and really before that, because the Pac-12 tried to get Oklahoma, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma State about 12 years ago. And what stopped it was Texas would not give up the Longhorn Network. Right. And that's what killed it. Otherwise, we'd have been in Pac-12 10 years now. But last year was really scary, because all of a sudden OU and Texas are gone. Not like we didn't know they weren't leaving, but it was a little bit scary because there weren't anybody handing out any lifeboats. So you understand the Big 12 fan side of it. When we didn't get any lifeboats last year, we got fortunate to dig ourselves out of the hole. but nobody gave us lifeboats, and yet we've offered 4 lifeboats. The pride sometimes goeth before a fall, and I hope for you and Utah fans that doesn't happen, or you have to go back to G5 or a very watered down Pac-12.
We can heal this relationship, Greg. We can heal.
I know we can. We can do it together.
Well, and that's the purpose of the Holy Rivals podcast that me and Wild Ute started, is not necessarily to marry BYU and Utah back again, but to bring the prominence of the Holy War back. And then we have very similar goals where we are. We're in a high growing population state, and in 5, 10 years, we're going to be in a whole different demographic balance, where you could say BYU could potentially be talking to the SEC. I don't think they're coming this far west, and Utah to the Big Ten could obviously happen, but we're still 5-10 years away from that. So,
well, look, and we know, hey, like I said, I'm an 2-time Oklahoma State grad. I love the Cowboys, but tomorrow, if the SEC offered Oklahoma State,
right,
they're gone.
And
that's true for anybody in this conference.
Sure.
The thing about this conference, the weakness is what makes it strong in a way, if that sounds crazy. Okay. If you got a couple of 10s in your conference, like you did the Pac-12, you had a couple of 10, well, at least one 10. I think USC is a 10. UCLA is probably about a 7. But they booked out of there. And Oregon and Washington want to book out of there. And Oklahoma and Texas wanted to book out of there. We knew that. And when they did, it was a little scary last year. Unfortunately, I think we got the 4 best G5s you could ever get. Right. One just played in the Final Four. One the year before that, argued for a national championship. They were undefeated in UCF. We've seen what BYU's done. They've got a national championship at 84. And then Houston, I think, is just a sleeping giant. The talent that comes out of Houston, if they can just keep 10% of those top kids there, they're going to be sick. So we got lucky in that those folks were there, but the Pac-12 doesn't have that luck, because what G5s, other than maybe San Diego State because they're basketball, but other than that, who do you take that's like as good as what the Big 12 just got? I don't think there's very many G5s out there. No. At all that are left, and then you're kind of landlocked west of the Rockies.
That's right,
because there just aren't very many good teams other than the ones that are already in your conference. So it's a tough dynamic. I would have loved it if 3-4 months ago Klikoff and Brett Yormark had a beer together and said, "Hey, let's merge. You guys basically are autonomous in the West. You're your own sub-conference. We'll keep ours. And the winners will play each other in the championship in Vegas or wherever."
Is that still?
I would love that.
I mean,
you think that's on the table?
I mean, is that still possible? Like,
I think it's
on right now. There's so much movement right now with the ACC.
The way the ACC,
the Pac struggles. Like, there's so much uncertainty. Like, who knows, right?
Well, I was kind of hoping with what happened with the ACC today, and I've been pushing this for about 3 weeks, as you know. That, look, folks, you think the ACC, this thing is, locked solid and they can't get out? There's not a contract in the world that can't be broken, okay?
Right.
Any good lawyer will tell you that. Now, bad lawyers will say, "Oh, I can't break that." These guys are all telling me, the ones we're talking to on the East Coast that are part of this deal, they're saying it can be broken. It'll be negotiated before that, but it can be broken. And that's why I think in this case, those 7 schools are going to go, "Hey, look, we'll break off. We'll go to the Big 12. We'll go somewhere else. We'll get our own thing. We'll go to the SEC, whatever. And we'll make a lot more money. We'd love to stay here, but we need more money. So what's it going to take? Go to ESPN, maybe force their hand? I don't know. But ESPN doesn't have a lot of money right now, as we know. And that's one thing that's hurt the Pac-12.
All right, so let's get some questions in here. Appreciate everybody joining us. Hit that subscribe and the thumbs up on the like of the show, and turn on those notifications. All right, from Mr. Bug 197, I think Louisville and Syracuse will be 2 big catches for the Big 12. Do you agree?
I half agree with him. I think Louisville, and I'm thinking of West Virginia. I'm thinking of our buddy Coos out there. Coos, You got to be watching. In every West Virginia, I kind of West Virginia was kind of my BYU before BYU, a school that I really wanted in the conference because I just loved their fan base and their passion. It's kind of like Utah too, until I started getting a lot of nasty people like, "Oh, you guys are a truck stop conference" and stuff like that. That's fine, but you know what? Like, hey, okay, so you're an old guy, you've never been married, and all these hot girls have already moved on. You might have to take a 5 or a 6 instead of a 9 or a 10 just to get you better than where you're at.
Right. And I told Coos I totally wanted him to have more schools in his neighborhood. They deserve it. They've earned it, and I don't see why we don't make that happen.
Well, they kind of like you guys have the Utah and BYU deal. They've got the Pitt and the West Virginia thing, and of course they're getting Cincinnati. They've been in their conference for a while, and I think them and UCF are going to have a pretty good tussle. So I'm looking forward to it. But I'd like to get a couple more on the East for West Virginia. They've been kind of patient, having to put in a lot of frequent flyer miles, over the last dozen years.
Right.
Pitt and Louisville.
Oh, absolutely. And I wanted Louisville. What was it? The last time we went through this, when we had to pick up TCU and who else did we pick up? Gosh, guys, help me out here. When all those teams left for 10 years ago,
TCU was the bad. Right?
TCU and who else though? Was West Virginia? It was West
You're
Virginia.
talking about when the Big East blew up? Is that what you're talking about?
We got West Virginia, we got TCU. That's right.
Right.
And made it back to 10 teams. And I love the West Virginia fans' passion. I really do. And same for you guys. But passion sometimes, you're gonna have your crazy fans, and I get that. And we've certainly got our share here in Stillwater, America. But crazy is what makes it fun, right?
That's why we're here, I think.
Absolutely.
All right. This next question is about the GOR and specifically for the ACC. If that breaks up, what kind of chaos does it bring? I think that's self-evident. But what is the possibility of breaking the GOR? Does just the granting rights, the 7.5 teams, as you mentioned, Greg, is that enough, or will there be legal challenges, possibly by some of the schools left out?
Well, and I'm doing some more phone calls on that because I want to get some lawyers to explain this. It's not something, even lawyers deal with every day. It's a different kind of law, contract law and business law and all that stuff that I fell asleep for in my senior year of class.
Right.
But like I said, they're all telling me this can be broken. And I believe them. I'm taking them at their word because they have no reason to lie to me, right? So,
right.
And we kind of run with that because, who better to get than a lawyer who's actually working on the case that knows, that knows some things. So I think it can be broken. I'm not sure, though, just being broken means the conference totally evaporates. Just like I think Oregon and Washington, if they left tomorrow for the Big Ten, the Pac-12 is not going to disintegrate. They're going to pick up some schools, kind of like the Big 12 did last year. The problem is they don't have as many good programs to pick up because they're kind of landlocked west of the Rockies. Now you could go get SMU, Tulane's been mentioned, some of those. So that may be something the Pac-12 is going to have to do is definitely go east of the Rockies and, gosh, maybe east of the Mississippi River if they go get a Memphis or somebody like that.
Do you guys have any concerns with the Pac linking up with the ACC and forming some type of merger? Is that something that you guys thought about, considered?
Pac-12, I think that's more taught from Pac-12. I've seen that from, Wilner and those kind of guys.
I think it's hoped more than.
Yeah, because it makes sense, but I have seen absolutely nothing from the ACC folks on that. Nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
I've never heard of an ACC source for that. It's all been Pac-12.
It's either been Wilner or Canzano or that other goof.
I mean, frankly, I think it could possibly work, and I wouldn't have an aversion to watching that league. But I do believe there are some logistics issues. You got cross-country travel more. You'd have to do some sort of a 3-3-6 or something like that, where you do 3 out of conference or 3, cross division, and I don't know how that would work. But
guys, don't you think similar to if they would have, jumped in with the Big 12? You basically keep your conference together. You just play each other basically during the year. Right. And then, so you're a conference in name only, really. you're more of a partnership.
Right.
Yeah, you're in the same conference, you have the same TV deal, but you got more teams. So if we go, let's say Oregon and Washington go, and so you got 8 left, you got 12 in the Big 12. Now we got 20.
Yeah.
And maybe BYU joins the Western Conference, because it makes more sense. I want to keep BYU in the Big 12. Don't get me wrong, but I also want to make it easier for them to travel and play their natural rivals.
Well, unfortunately, we've been traveling. We've been out in the wilderness for a decade and more now. So
you guys, but I always tell people this, it's like, why do you like BYU so much? Like, you're not even LDS. And I'm like, well, because I respect them. I'm not LDS and I will never be LDS. But I mean, what you guys do with the missions and stuff like that, if every religion had that, we'd have a better world. We really would. You guys definitely talk the talk and walk the walk as well. And I like that about BYU. And I think I've told you my story. I used to date an LDS girl when I was an undergrad back in the early 80s and saw how BYU is every Saturday, man, at the church in Stillwater. They were watching, and that was probably right around the national championship year, too.
We used to watch them from 78 on. We were watching on those giant 12-foot satellite dishes. We were watching at the state game.
And this is when
you'd watch games at the church?
Yeah. Yeah, BYU.
Satellite, and nobody had that back then.
Nobody had satellite back then.
We didn't even have cable in Stillwater back then. I think we got that year, maybe. But
we used to go to the church and watch the games and then play basketball right after. So
man,
that was a great Saturday, in my opinion.
Definitely.
I haven't heard this before. I've heard the NIL part about Stanford, but this question is considering whether they're maybe getting, de-emphasizing football and just sticking with the Olympic sports. Have you heard anything like that, Greg?
Well, here's the deal at Stanford, and I think people forgot this. You guys may know this, but Stanford during the epidemic or pandemic 3 years ago, they dropped everything. I mean, they dropped all of their sports, right? They just completely shut it down, and then they just picked them back up after that. I think they got a lot of pushback from their alumni, and so they brought sports back. But yeah, if any school out there that's P5 right now that doesn't really emphasize sports that much, Stanford and Cal are probably two of them. Yeah. They get pretty excited when they play each other at the end of the year, and have some pretty cool kickback returns and stuff like that.
That was back in the day for sure.
But other than that, what do you know about Cal and Stanford?
Nothing.
I mean, seriously, Stanford was pretty good back 2011 when Oklahoma State played them in the Fiesta, and they were number 3 and 4, and Oklahoma State probably should have gotten the top 2 that time over Alabama, but did not. So it's what it is. The thing is on the merging of, why not have the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 all protect each other by having a super conference?
There we go. We go.
Solved all the world's problems right there. Wow. Now we got to get a cure for cancer.
That sounds like the alliance to me. Those are
how that alliance thing work out?
Eddie, sorry, that last comment was from Tony P. Sorry, I didn't say your name. Eddie Lozano would like Pitt, Louisville, Georgia Tech, and Virginia Tech. Are those sort of a wish list schools for the Big 12?
I'm thinking the way West Virginia does, and I like Pitt, I like Louisville, I like Virginia Tech. Georgia Tech, I'm not sure about. Georgia Tech, they went to the Final Four in 2004. I know that well because I was sitting there on press row watching them beat my Cowboys at the end, and we didn't get the championship game. And gosh, I'm trying to remember what else. I just think that I don't know. I don't know, guys. That's one of those. That's a good question, though. I just don't know. I don't know who the fourth one would be. I don't think it's Georgia Tech, though. I can't remember, and maybe Coos will text in or somebody. There's somebody else they want. I'm really trying to remember and it's somebody who's not AAU accredited either.
Was
So
it Syracuse potentially?
it might have been, and it might have been kind of because they're looking at Connecticut as a basketball, although they've got football. You would bring in Syracuse, although now you've lost Boeheim, so I don't know what kind of program that's going to be. I don't see Boston College, Syracuse, Georgia Tech. I really don't see those programs as moving the needle much. No offense, it's just, from somebody out here in the Midwest who watches a ton of television, and I'm flipping the channels, I don't watch Georgia Tech. I think they ran the wishbone for 100 years, and that's not the kind of football I wanted to see.
They kind of had to, because their academics kept a lot of the other athletes away, so they needed to be kind of like Air Force in a lot of ways.
And I'm a realist too, guys. Here's the deal. It's kind of pointless for us to say who's the Big 12 going to take. We should be asking who's the SEC and the Big 10 going to leave.
Right.
Because if they decide they want Virginia Tech, if they decide they want Pitt, if they decide they want Louisville, you're not going to get them because they can pay way, way more.
Agreed. Jake Till,
and the SEC, I think that the Magnificent Seven, if we're looking at those schools outside of Virginia Tech, I'm not sure Virginia Tech, maybe NC State, I'm not sure they're going to be included in that, in the SEC.
Well, and then you remember what I mentioned before about how, Virginia and Virginia Tech have to be joined at the hip, and North Carolina State have to be joined at the hip, or Duke and North Carolina. No, they don't.
Right.
On the basketball thing, North Carolina and Duke can play each other home and home every year non-conference. Right. Why not? It'll bring you up your RPI strength of schedule, right?
Yeah. Hey, guys, another thought with that, too. So we just looked at those 4 teams. How do those 4 teams stack up versus the 4 corners? I mean, if you're trying to select 4.
Great question.
Teams, right? Like, who's more valuable? Like,
well,
review of that.
I don't, I know some people told me that, the ACC is more valuable. And probably TV-wise they are, which is why they're making more TV money. But as far as, how tough they are in football and things like that, I don't think there's a ton of difference. Virginia Tech's been in a national championship game. It's been a long time ago, but is when they had Vic at quarterback. And North Carolina, I mean, they've been up and down. They've never been great in football. North Carolina State's more of a basketball school too. Of course, the Big 12 is a basketball conference. That's what they're known for, right?
Right.
Especially now that Oklahoma and Texas are gone, it's much more known as a basketball conference. And so maybe it's just not a coincidence I'm wearing a Kansas shirt accidentally, but yeah, it's definitely a basketball conference. I'd really like to see Arizona in the conference just because they're so good in basketball year in, year out, have been for, since I was in grad school when they won the national championship. So with Lute Olson and of course, Utah was in the championship game about 25 years ago with Rick Majerus. And
they were.
Coach Majerus was a good friend. And so, always like that. And Keith Van Horn, one of my favorite players of all time. He's on Twitter a lot, guys. I don't know if you know that or not, but anyway, and once again, the stuff with Utah fans that got on Twitter, it's kind of fun. I like to spar verbally, so that's just maybe me more than them. But listen, if tomorrow they say those 4 corner schools are coming in, I'll welcome them with open arms, and I'll be cheering for Utah when they're playing a non-Big 12 school.
If Utah ends up in the Big 12, they will be a loyal conference member. I'm not saying
it's 100%.
Look how loyal we are to the pack. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm definitely coming to the first time BYU and Utah play
as conference
members. Dude, my travel agent's out of Orem, so I'm going to have him set me up a plane, fly right into Utah, and come watch that game.
You can stay at my house, Greg.
You got it, baby.
Okay.
I'm there.
When Oklahoma State comes, you could come and stay at my house too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm there.
Sweet.
But you gotta show me all the good eats, all the great places to eat.
There's some good holes in the wall we can find.
That's what I hear.
J Till 82, where are you, Miami? I personally believe Miami's probably going to be a reach for the Big Ten, but boy, they would be a great fit for the Big 12.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're interested in the Big 12. And kind of like the Pac-12 schools, they're all interested in the Big 10. Well, why wouldn't you be? They'd be foolish if they weren't. But you also have to be realistic, and know what's going on. And is the Big 10 going to take anybody? And if so, are they going to take you? And things like that. It's kind of like, the hot cheerleader that I always wanted to date. I knew she wasn't going to go out with me, so I went out with somebody else, right? But that's sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And if, people are talking, well, let's give them a 5-year deal and give Oregon and Washington a little more money. The revenue sharing stuff, unequal revenue sharing, I cannot tell you strongly enough. I'm against that in any conference at any time because I see what it does. Oklahoma and Texas used it negative recruiting on the rest of the conference.
Right.
Look, they pay us more because we're big stuff and you're not, and blah, blah, blah. And it worked, and they're, power schools, but no, it doesn't work. It didn't keep them happy very long.
Yeah, it's the death knell of conferences.
I think
agree.
Miami's a sneaky good play for the Big Ten.
What's that?
Big Ten for
Miami.
Yeah, Miami could because they're AAU, and I know, gosh, what was Donna Shalala, who basically tried to downgrade athletics when she was there as president. They've got a president now who's very pro athletics. Their NIL is off the charts. It might be one of the best in the country. It's not what NIL was intended to be. I know you guys did NIL stuff earlier today. That's
Right.
not what NIL was supposed to be. But you know what? Until they do something about it, Miami's going to throw that money out there. And what kid wouldn't want to go to Miami, Florida, and play in the sunshine and make money, right?
It'll just be just like the 80s is all it is. It'll just make it normalized.
A bunch of Michael Irvins out there with more bling.
That's right. That's what I was thinking. Benny Blades. Yeah.
Yeah. What was it? He said the better team is the prison team, but we're not in prison yet, or something. So
yeah, that was what was it? It was convicts and Catholics. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a 30 for 30 on that, I think.
I was at that BYU Miami game, and I can tell you right now, I have never seen a better football game in my life. So
just the highlights looked incredible.
It was amazing, and to be in the building was something else. Anyway.
My sister, when we first moved here when I was 16, my sister's 2 years younger than me, so about maybe I was already in college probably, and she was probably about a junior or senior. She dated Jimmy Johnson's oldest son. He was coach at Oklahoma State then before he went to Miami and got that program going. But Jimmy was a hoot. Jimmy hadn't changed from what I understand. He still parties.
He looks like it.
Any good stories you tell us?
I can off the air, yes. Yeah, I'll tell you a real good one about a pool party late into the early morning hours with cheerleaders and prom girls.
Okay, yeah. This is an NC-17 show, so we're okay.
I'd like another show out of Utah where the guy throws off F-bombs every 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, are you allowed to throw F-bombs in Utah?
He's from California and Arizona. He's from California.
Oh, that's right. He was in Arizona, wasn't
he? BYU fans won't say them unless they're actually playing Utah, and all of a sudden they come out a little bit. Sometimes.
I say them. All right. Eric Ruby. This will be our last question, Greg, and we really want to appreciate you being with us tonight. We're going to need to schedule a longer time. And I think what we'll do is we'll get you on the Holy Rivals show, and we can dive into the psychosis that is Utah athletics and the Pac-12, and I'll turn over the entire show to Wild Ute because he's got thoughts, and you'll really love to hear it because I think it'll fill in some of those gaps.
Okay.
You and I didn't understand the whys of the last 9 months, and he'll be able to. Anyway,
I understand more just from this show.
Right. Well, you'll know a lot more then because
it's partial delusion, guys. It's partial craziness too. I'll be honest here.
It's all
not all sanity here.
Mine is 60 years of college football insanity, all wrapped into one little body. So
That's right. All right, last one for Eric Ruby, and I appreciate everybody who's commented tonight. Thanks for getting your comments in. I really appreciate it, and we'll just keep putting these shows out. So please continue to subscribe and hit that notifications button. Eric Ruby, SEC can't add anyone unless ESPN agrees paying them. Like Swaim said, ESPN is tight on budgets. Other than FSU and Clemson, who's worth $75 million? I don't think NC State is. What are your thoughts there?
And here's the deal, guys. Even if ESPN doesn't pay more, for let's say they add 2 schools, right? They're going to go ahead and do some tier 3 stuff, is what I understand, to make it. The Big Ten also is they're not going to get much more money than what they've already got from the TV partners because of what we mentioned, the budgets and whatnot. But they can make more money from a number of other revenue sources, which is something Klykov's trying to do for the Pac-12 and should. The tier 3 stuff, the streaming stuff, all the others that go other than just linear.
Right.
Gosh, for years it was just that's all there was linear, right? Well, now we've got different opportunities. You can go cable, you can go satellite, you can go streaming. Everything I do is streaming now. We're streaming right now, but everything I watch is on Roku, so it's all streaming. And hey, I think it's the wave of the future. Unfortunately, the masses aren't just there yet. So the 5-year plan may be if you can keep everybody but Oregon and Washington in the Pac-12 and maybe add a couple of good schools, they'll be fine. They'll just be cash poor for a while, and they'll have to figure out ways to cut, maybe cut some programs. As sad as that is, let's be honest, besides football and basketball, nothing else makes money anywhere. So,
right.
Hey, Bomber, looking at Eric's comment, ask yourself this question. How many schools in all are worth $75 million a year? Seriously.
Well, Notre Dame sure not.
There's probably 10 in the land.
We haven't even talked about Notre Dame yet. They're supposed to be the number 1 team, right? As far as eyes and ears and all that. Now, I don't know if that's true. I still think now internationally BYU is. It's not close. Because some guy tried to argue with me the other day. Go, well, they don't even have satellites in Africa. Sure, they do. They got them everywhere. Right. Every little village in Africa has the ability to watch television on satellite. So, yeah, get that in your head.
Greg, I got to ask you this. How much do you think BYU is worth, then, based on that comment? I'm curious.
Well, that's something that, they're worth more than obviously if they didn't have that international mission that, draws people. All these people know in Africa and Europe is BYU because that's the only Americans they've met, right? That's the only American football they know. So they're watching it. How much is that worth? I don't think we know yet. It's the same reason why Yormark wants to play down in Mexico. Same reason why the Big Ten and other places go to Ireland, and the NFL goes to Wembley every year, and I think they play in they play in Mexico too. Yeah, Germany. Yeah. And that German crowd was lit, by the way. That was great.
I was so mad Seattle lost that game.
Yeah, but wasn't that crowd great?
It was. Really
they didn't speak English. I'm not sure they knew the game. But man, were they getting into it. I love that.
They love that there.
But let's say 15, 20 years from now, where we have maybe some college football, maybe in Hamburg, Germany, there's a college that plays football and stuff like that. And they start getting into it, and more people are watching American football. Well, BYU is the one they're going to know because those are the ones that have missions in every little nook and cranny of the United States and the world. So
right.
BYU is a different animal, and it's all good for them. Because they've got something that really nobody else has because of their faith. But that's why the Irish are so big, because we have a lot of Catholics in this country, especially the major cities, and all those subway alums in Chicago, they call them, and things like that. But I don't think anybody's worth $75 million as a individual team. Obviously, I don't think Notre Dame is. What has Notre Dame done? In a long time, they haven't done much.
Nothing since '88.
My Cowboys were down 21 to them the second half in the bowl and came back and beat them last year. So
Yeah,
I don't think
know.
Notre Dame's quite what they. When I was a little kid growing up in West Lafayette, Indiana, from age 5 on, going to every Purdue Notre Dame game, I hated them. I mean, I still hate Notre Dame because of that. I just they beat the crap out of us every year.
Right.
I feel the same way about them as I do Oklahoma now, but you know how that works. Your rivals, but. Uh, Man, I don't know. I don't think Notre Dame's going to get quite what they want. They might live with it, but I would love to see. If you looked at who the SEC actually wanted today, out of those 7, there were 5 of them mentioned. Why 5? 5 doesn't work. You got to have 4 or 6, right? So who's going to be the 6th? Notre Dame. I think there have already been talks. Notre Dame knows they're going to get about 50, and they can get that with the Big Ten, not have to worry about scheduling for all their minor sports as well. I really think you'll see Notre Dame in the Big Ten soon. That's a natural fit. It always has been.
Very good. Well, I had a quote, but then I needed to send Ute fan Ivan a note, and now I've got. Now, let me see if I've lost it. I did lose it. I had sent Bob Thompson a message, basically asking the question that we have framed here, and that is, if the value isn't there, if that proposition isn't out there, do teams, if they didn't already know that they would have options with other conferences, would they be meeting for these 3 days?
No,
I
they
don't
already
think.
know. They already know. Those 7 already know they have a soft landing, and that's
Right.
why the Boston colleges, the Syracuse, schools like that haven't jumped yet. You
Okay.
need one more, and it'll probably be Notre Dame as they figure out here. I can just see Notre Dame because they love the publicity. Can't you just see them wait till Wednesday, last minute, and all of a sudden getting this thing done? I'd love to
Right.
see it. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'd love to see it.
Yeah, that would definitely shock the world, I think. Well, Greg, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on and being with Wild Ute and I tonight. And we'll schedule a call in the next couple weeks where you can come in and we can talk Holy War and
I'd
BYU
love
and
to.
Utah, and you can get to know these Ute fans that I agree with. Wild Ute, they're just as passionate as BYU fans are, and
We'll get along through the Big 12
it,
eventually.
that's where I think too. But anyway, Wild, you want to see anything else?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter, the Wild Ute. I'm active and come out with some crazy ideas. Love the engagement. So throw some crazy stuff at me. Let's talk about some realignment possibilities.
And I love your profile pic. Half Utes, half K State. So you're ready for the Big 12 already, guy.
Greg, what do you want to say on your outro here?
Just hey, follow us at Swaim, GSWAIM, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram and all those cool things, but mostly on Twitter. And I'll wake up early tomorrow because we'll get all over it because we're going to be meeting early on the East Coast.
All right, very good. And let's just finish this off by saying appreciate everybody viewing tonight. This is the most views we've had on our show so far. Really appreciate the visitors that I've had, and please subscribe, leave me a comment, and put a thumbs up, and stay with us as we continue down this long road that is realignment, Pac-12 and Big 12, and all things points east. We'll see you later. Everybody have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.